What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of F2P MMO. Today, it's another episode of Paragon. Some of you might be wondering, why the hell am I still uploading Paragon material if you've been really active in the Paragon community. Of course, the big news is Paragon got discontinued as of April 22nd, 2018. And so I guess this episode is going to be more of a tribute, and I have a lot of games that were recorded on a hard drive, so it's just kind of just reminiscing of the good times that I had in the game. So I'm going to kind of upload some of the remaining videos that I have. And in this video, I'm going to talk about just the pros and cons of the game that I really liked and what I didn't like, and then my take on what perhaps ended Paragon Fortnite, and stuff like what moves on with Paragon after it being taken off the servers, and any other games that might have adapted its assets or concepts, whatnot. And lastly, just give a channel update. So let's begin.
Round and round we go, losing self-control. I keep telling myself, but
so some of the pros that I really loved about Paragon was that when it first came out, I think when I first saw the trailer of it on YouTube, was something that I felt like revolutionary. The way the graphics was, the way the characters were built, I felt like it was so unique that it was something very different from what the MOBA scene already had. You know, you had Dota, you have League of Legends, and then you had Smite. And Smite was very different because Smite was third person. And so this was along the lines of Smite, but it wasn't top-down view. This was totally third person. You could see communication was very key in this game and on your mini-map and what's in front of you, but you couldn't, zoom at a certain part of the map away from your characters. So it was very different from all the other MOBAs. It was completely different with the way the graphics were. It was much more polished. It was much more beautiful than I think some of the other games when it comes to graphics at the time when it was announced. So when the game first came out in open beta, and it was Legacy, which if you don't know what Legacy is, it's basically the map and update package of the previous update before Monolith. It was when the game initially started in open beta. You can refer to the previous video of mine that introduced Paragon, and the game it wasn't polished. I had to say there were certain kinks to it, there were certain issues to it. It was very intriguing. It was a game that you just wanted to play. It was a game that you were very interested in. It was a game that had a lot of potential, like tremendous potential. There were just certain things throughout as the game progressed, as Paragon grew, that the fan base wanted more, but I think the developer just had a hard time delivering. Pro-wise, I really enjoyed playing each of the classes, even though there were certain classes I was just terrible at. Like, I would practice with bots, but I would never take it to PvP. I would never take it into any game because playing that role was very difficult, and I was not good at it. But there were certain classes I just loved. For instance, Khaimera. I just loved Khaimera. I loved the way it moved. It was a very fluid class that I was able to just kind of jungle around, move around, not feel slow or sluggish. Con-wise, I feel the biggest thing was that there was just a lack of adjustments, or the developer's inability to meet the feedback that the community had given over and over again. It was like trying to beat on a dead horse. And there were issues about, I think the main issue for me that I really felt that the developer should have worked on was, instead of constantly introducing all these new classes, it was like, here's a new toy, here's a new toy, here's a new toy. I didn't want all the new toys. What I really wanted, class balance, and there was just no class balance. I mean, the lack of class balance was something that really bothered me. And I felt like it got out of hand because you had so many classes. At a certain point, with all the new characters that they were bringing in, with the new classes that they were bringing in, that the previous characters, especially the ones that came in the very beginning with Legacy, that it was out of date. They couldn't really balance the new classes with the old classes, and that was the biggest issue. Over time, when you had over 30 different characters, move sets, all of a sudden the balance was literally impossible because all the combinations that you had to balance between each of the classes. And I think the developer just, you can't keep kicking the can down the road, or you can't make the project bigger than it needs to be. And they made the project bigger than it needed to be. And so I felt like that was the main issue that was kind of caused the game to kind of went from really popular to everybody being frustrated with it. Especially particularly for me, I felt like there was just a lack of class balance. And then other times that I really wasn't satisfied with the game was just the matching system. I understood the game was open beta. That I definitely got. But I felt like at times, you could match up to people who are completely new to the game, have never played this game, or you can match up to players that have competed in leagues or tournaments or have played it quite a while, have written Reddit threads or blogs about how to improve your game, how to get better, things to learn from. They had to have a matching system where it had to be based on players' experience, the time they spent, their wins and losses, what class they've maxed out, the level, the playing hours that they've played. I understand there's probably not enough users of the game, but I also felt like during peak hours, in the evening, they had enough players to match. They really needed a system for good matching, because without it, you really had people that were either really frustrated with their teams because not everybody knows everybody, people who knew each other really well and they were just dominating, and you couldn't do anything because their communication was top notch, their strategy was tested continuously before, and guys really played well. And I met people who I played really well with, and I met people I played terrible with, and sometimes it happens. You can't have when your community starts growing, because you're going to get a very diversified user base. In all, I feel like these two things, the lack of balance between classes and the lack of a proper matching system, really created issues. And also with people, kind of trolling or dropping out of the game and whatnot. The game was great, but it was just not managed well. And I feel like if they manage it better, I think the game would have been much better. Other things I felt like was the update with Monolith. I think Legacy was such a great creative game that it introduced Paragon, and because it was out for so long, a lot of the players had already developed strategies and already had adapted to that map and that play style. And when they introduced Monolith, you introduce a new map, which is great. I think having a new map is great. What I don't like was the fact that you got rid of the old map. I think they should have kept it or updated the old one and kept two maps on their servers, so players can choose to play Monolith or play Legacy. Unfortunately, they only moved towards Monolith and just completely abandoned Legacy, and in my opinion, that's terrible. You don't want to alienate your player base that you started out with in open beta, because there's just so many. When your game is new, that's the time when it basically grabs the most attention, because that's when a lot of people jump on. A lot of people who are really interested jump on, and the ones that stay were your initial fan base that really loved your game and that your game was able to have that user retention. But unfortunately, they basically angered all of those players, and the player retention is gone. So that was very, very important, in my opinion, that they should have not alienated those players who really enjoyed Legacy and should have kept them around. And I felt like the changes that they made from Legacy to Monolith was huge. The first thing they got rid of was the battle mode, where if you look at the previous video that I had done on a Legacy map, you start realizing when you're in battle, you don't immediately have the runaway speed. You kind of have this 3-second cooldown, moving extremely slow, and then you get that ability to move at your regular speed. They got rid of that, which to me it's a great idea, certainly, but it certainly changes the game's strategy. It changes the tremendous strategy, because when you don't have that initial luxury of, saying, running away from a fight mode into your running speed, you have to position yourself in a fight. Where are you going to stand? How far are you going to stand from the first or the closest, the nearest escape route? Those strategies were practiced and developed on a very familiar map. All of a sudden you changed the map. So that changed a lot of people's strategies, particularly for mine as well. And I feel like a lot of users didn't like that huge change. Maybe it should have been more of a gradual change, or something like, hey, here's a test map, here's what Paragon could be like, here's Monolith, but we're going to keep Legacy, and those who enjoy Legacy could stay on Legacy, and others who love Monolith. But at some point, you kind of gradually get players to migrate from Legacy to Monolith, instead of giving them such a stark contrast, and then all of a sudden they're not able to make that gap of adjustments. Other things that I felt like was just with the change of Monolith, so many players left. Like I think my friends list, a quarter of it was a lot of players didn't come back, and that was a little bit of disappointment. And some of those players were really good. I mean, to me, they were pretty top-notch players in the sense that of game management, familiarity with their classes. They knew what they were doing. They knew how to, lead by example. And then you had new players who really weren't familiar with the game, and there was a lot of miscommunications, and there were even players, who were international, and you didn't speak the same language. So you kept, the messaging system on the server as English, but people didn't recognize it, or you type messages and people can't read it because they spoke a different language. So when you had this type of issue, communication is key in MOBAs, and especially in team MOBAs. So when you have that kind of an issue, you kind of have some bad games, or bad matchups for that reason. Transitioning on, I mean, we could talk about, Fortnite and how that became such a huge success, and I don't blame them. I think Fortnite was a great hit when they least expected. I think they did a phenomenal job with that game. The thing with Fortnite that I really didn't like was the fact that it drew so much resources away from Paragon. I think if it hadn't taken out so much of the resource, I think Paragon would have lived on. I don't think it would have been terminated. I don't think it would have been discontinued. But because of its success, it absorbed so much of the developers' resources that they had no choice to say, hey, we can't support this game anymore, we can only support one. Fortnite, I think Paragon was trying to, the developer was trying to move Paragon into the sort of the feels of Fortnite, and that feels is that it's a high speed, high octane, spontaneous game where everybody's just having a blast. And yeah, that's true, but MOBA usually start out slow. If you look at Dota, if you look at League of Legends, in any game that you start out with, MOBAs tends to start out slow. You're getting your experience points, or you're getting your gold, or you're getting your resources, and then you're building your character. So the first, 5 minutes of the game is slow. It's always going to be slow. You don't have all your movesets. You don't have anything. Fortnite, I think, yeah, you start out slow in the beginning too. You have to grab all your resources. You have to find a good hiding spot. But it's first-person shooter. There's the lack of need to balance your classes. Fortnite, you just need to get the best guns and then the best positions. While here, you gotta consider your movesets, your progressions, and what's your combos. So it's a little bit different in that sense. And then which buffs you're gonna get, and how you jungle and how you control lanes. That really just said a lot about where the developers' focus was. And I think the other thing, just looking at Fortnite and then Paragon, is that the developer is phenomenal when it comes to artwork and development and creativity of classes and maps and whatnot. But when it comes to actually computing and changing how classes work and whatnot. I think, to me, I don't think they have the best in the industry to do it. I just feel like they have something. When it comes to artwork and map development, I think they look phenomenal. I really do. And I think they've done the aesthetic part really well. I remember when Paragon first came out and it was really, really glitchy. That's how I personally feel about the pros and cons and whatnot. But the good news is Paragon did release all of the assets. The developer decided to release the assets for Paragon, and there are other games that are, or developers are using their assets. There's something called Phoenix Rising that's currently in closed alpha, that's in development, and then there are other people that are testing their assets. I will continue to upload a lot of my Paragon videos, just kind of as a montage of reminiscing just the good times on this game, and I'll probably be adding a few other games in the near future, so stay tuned for that. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye, guys.
I don't wanna let you know. Is this what we become? Strangers on the run, looking for some